As I preach through 1 Timothy, the next text in our series is 1 Timothy 6, 17 through 19. Starting with verse 17. As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. Now this emphasizes riches. Let me show that to you here. The first phrase says, as for the rich in this present age. Don't set your heart on or your hopes on the uncertainty of riches. And God richly provides us with everything to enjoy. Be rich in good works and store up treasure. That's be rich. It's all about riches. It's about money and possessions. So I've already preached how many sermons on money and possessions so far in 1 Timothy? 3. One guy got it right. 3. So the first one was back in 1 Timothy 3:3, not a lover of money. I gave 4 exhortations about riches. And then I introduced 1 Timothy 6, 6 to 10 in this passage with another series of 4 exhortations. So let me remind you what those 8 exhortations are combined. Beware that greed for money and possessions is wicked. Greed is wicked. Beware that money and possessions don't last. They're temporary. Beware that money and possessions are dangerous. And be content with what you have. And you might conclude then, oh, well, it's so dangerous. I don't want any money. I should give it all away and curse somebody else with it. No. Don't conclude, number 5, that money and possessions are inherently evil. Enjoy money and possessions as gifts from God. Steward money and possessions as blessings from God. And don't assume that material wealth or poverty necessarily indicates spiritual wealth or poverty. And then in the third sermon, this is on verses 6 to 10, I preached on the 2 exhortations there, be content and don't love money. And now in this 4th sermon on money and possessions, we're ready to consider verses 17 and 19. In this passage, Paul gives 4 charges about riches. So I'd like to preach to you on verses 17 and 19 on this subject, 4 charges about riches. Now before we consider those 4 charges, I want to consider the opening phrase, as for the rich in this present age. So let's consider 3 introductory questions. First, who are the charges in verses 17 to 19 for? These commands aren't just for rich people in general. These are commands for rich believers. He's not rebuking rich believers for being rich. Is it sinful for a Christian to be rich? No. But if you are rich, you'll face certain temptations regarding your wealth. Then the second question to consider is, what does in this present age imply? That phrase emphasizes that riches are temporary. It's for now, in this present age. So this phrase downplays riches. If you're rich in this present age, that's a temporary richness. It's just for when you're on this earth. And this life on earth is a vapor. It vanishes. It doesn't last. And then third question, do you think of yourself as rich? Do you? So when you read this passage with me and you heard this charge to the rich, did you think, oh, I need to hear this. I am so rich. I really need to hear this. I'm just guessing that you probably heard that and thought, yeah, those rich people really need this. Maybe I need a little bit, but I'm definitely not rich. So I just want to address that for a second. My guess is that when you think of rich people, you might think of famous, rich billionaires like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or Oprah Winfrey or J.K. Rowling. I just checked. She just became a billionaire. She's just there. Now, if you're comparing yourself to people like that, then you're probably not rich, right? You might think, I'm just a middle-class guy, or I'm even poor, poverty level. There's always somebody else who has more stuff than you do, right? So I'd like to encourage you to adopt a different perspective here. Just zoom out, and instead of comparing yourself to people like Elon Musk, compare yourself to most of the people alive on this planet right now, and then zoom out a little bit more, and compare yourself to most people who have lived on this planet throughout world history. Just get a little perspective that way. If you did that, what do you think those people would think of you? How many rooms does your house have? How many vehicles do you drive? How many clothes do you have? How many screens, TVs, computers, tablets, phones? Do you ever worry about missing a meal? Do you live in a home with climate control and electricity and running water? So we become so accustomed to a relatively high standard of living that we can think of ourselves as poor or not rich because we're comparing ourselves to other people who are more wealthy. But we, right now, already live better than kings did in the history of the world. I've been to some of these castles with my family in England, or the royalty lived, and they're drafty and freezing cold in British standards, and they had fireplaces all over the place, and it's still cold. Like, you can set your home to 66 degrees in Minnesota, and you could walk around the house in a short-sleeve t-shirt when if you walked outside, you'd die within 10 minutes. And we think that's just normal. And then we can store our food in refrigerators and freezers and conveniently just keep it there. And throughout the entire year, we can walk into any number of hundreds of stores within driving distance and buy fresh fruits and vegetables and poultry and dairy and never wonder, will there be grapes today? They're just there. Amazing. And then we don't worry about drinking unsanitary water. You just worry, if I drink this, will I get some disease, or will it sit well with me? Or we never stop, and almost never stop, and just marvel at the ingenuity of indoor plumbing. Wow. For toilets, for sinks, for showers. So our experience of a crisis is when the electricity goes out for a whole day. What about all our food in the fridge and the freezer, and that's our crisis. So what we do, we have those conveniences. I'll just mention another area is travel. Our conveniences we have with travel. In the history of the world, most people got around by what? By walking. They walked. Today we have to get our steps in and buy treadmills. So we just take for granted we've got vehicles to get places, and not only just get places in massive comfort, on cushy seats, on paved roads, going 70 miles an hour while listening to your favorite music or an audiobook or talking to someone on the phone who lives 500 miles away as you're driving. And then we get places that are far away very quickly. We just take this for granted. Remember, it wasn't too long ago that the most effective means of travel was a horse and a buggy. So, and then that's just locally. You can travel internationally. In one day, you can be from here to just about any place in the world, and within a day, you can get all settled. You don't have to take a 3-month sea voyage where you risk your life and limb. You can just get there in a day. Now, I could go on and on. I'll stop there. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. Not at all. God has graciously given you many gifts, and you should enjoy them with thanksgiving. My point in all this is that you are not poor. So stop thinking about yourself as poor. You are rich. And that means that this passage is for you. Imagine that the people to whom Paul wrote this letter, Timothy and the church at Ephesus, imagine that somehow God miraculously gave them a vision of what a day in the life of you looks like. They see where you live. They see all the conveniences you have, all the screens, all the technology, all the food, food, where you go shopping, and they take all that in. What are they going to think about you? Remember, Paul's writing this to people in the first century, and he's charging rich believers. What would those rich believers think of you? Would they think that you're richer than they are? Absolutely. So I'm just trying to frame this so that as we look at this text, we're not dismissing it as this text is not for me. This text is absolutely for you. You are rich, and these 4 charges are for you. So now let's consider these 4 charges. Charge number 1, don't be haughty about your riches. First 2 lines of verse 17 say, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, not to be conceited, arrogant, proud. So it's not sinful for a Christian to be rich. It's sinful for a Christian to be haughty, proud about his riches. So when you're rich, and you are rich, you'll be tempted to be proud about your riches. You'll be tempted to think that you're better than other people who don't have as much money and stuff as you do. Like when you think about your situation and people who live in some super poverty third world country, do you think, well, yeah, well, I'm just better than they are. I'm just smarter than they are. You might be tempted to think that you're inherently better because you're more skilled, or you're harder working, or you're wiser, or whatever. And when you're rich, you'll be tempted to depend on your riches, to rely on yourself instead of relying on God. So the riches you enjoy are a gift from God. You didn't earn them. You didn't even work for much of your wealth. Did you invent indoor plumbing? Do you even know how an HVAC system works? Could you make one for your own house? Did you invent the automobile or the plane or the cell phone or the internet? I know some people thought they invented the internet, but probably didn't. Being proud about your riches is folly. Beware. That's charge number 1. Don't be haughty about your riches. Charge 2. Don't set your hope on the uncertainty of riches. Next line in verse 17 says, so charge them not to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, of wealth. So don't put your hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. Don't trust in your money, which is so unreliable. So why should you not hope in your money? It's because your money is uncertain. Trusting in riches is like driving your truck, or like driving Pastor Dustin's was it a 550, 750, 450, that big old thing, like driving that on thin ice in, let's say, early April in Minnesota to go ice fishing. I'm not driving it. No way. It's not going to hold. I see some people here who aren't from Minnesota going, you drive your trucks on ice? It's a thing here. Yeah, but imagine driving a truck on ice that's that thick. It's not going to hold your truck. You're going to go under. That's what it's like to trust in your riches. It's like trusting on thin ice to hold up a massive truck. So here's some other passages in Scripture that teach that riches are uncertain. Proverbs 11, whoever trusts in his riches will fall. Proverbs 18, a rich man's wealth is his strong city, and like a high wall in his imagination. So, in other words, the rich think of their wealth, they're thinking about it like it's a strong defense. They imagine it to be a high wall of safety, but it's not. Proverbs 23, don't toil to acquire wealth, be discerning enough to desist. When your eyes light on it, it's gone. For suddenly it sprouts wings, flying like an eagle toward heaven. Proverbs 27, riches do not last forever. And Jesus says in Matthew 6, don't lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. In just a matter of hours, you can go from being extremely wealthy to being in poverty. It can happen through fire, through flood, through fraud. In December 2008, some people experienced this when Bernie Madoff's massive Ponzi scheme collapsed. Elie Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor and Nobel Peace Prize winner, spent 40 years building his life savings and a $15 million foundation, and he remarked, all of a sudden, everything we've done in 40 years was gone. Actors Kevin Bacon and Kyra Sedgwick lost around $30 million overnight. After the 2008 financial crisis, Sean Quinn went from Ireland's richest man to filing for bankruptcy with virtually nothing left. Curt Schilling, a Major League Baseball pitcher, invested heavily in a video game company. And in May 2012, that company ran out of money, declared bankruptcy, and Schilling lost over $50 million of his personal fortune. There wasn't a shilling to his name left. No, that's not quite right, but yeah. So you can spend your life accumulating wealth and then lose it all in a moment. Riches are uncertain. So to trust in riches is to seek security from the wrong source. Psalm 52 warns an evil man like this: God will break you down forever. He'll snatch and tear you from your tent. He'll uproot you from the land of the living. Selah. The righteous shall see and fear and shall laugh at him. They'll mock this guy. What are they going to say? See the man who would not make God his refuge, but trusted in the abundance of his riches and sought refuge in his own destruction. Don't be a fool like such an evil man. Don't trust in the abundance of your riches. That's charge number 2. Don't set your hope on the uncertainty of riches. And you can see here in verse 7, the righteous man mocks a man who would not make God his refuge. So if you shouldn't set your hope on the uncertainty of riches, what should you hope on? Or whom should you set your hope on? And that's charge number 3. Set your hope on God, which includes enjoying all of God's abundant gifts. Let's read the next 2 lines in verse 17. So don't charge them not to be haughty or set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. God richly supplies us with all things for our enjoyment. That phrase, set their hopes on, translates a word that does not have the sense that we might use that word for. In English, we say, like my daughter will say, I hope it's going to snow on Christmas. They say that every year. And what that means is, I really want it to snow. I'm wishing that it might snow, but it might not snow. It may or may not happen, but I really hope it does. That's a common way we use the word hope. I hope this happens. That's not what this word is connoting. This word is a confident expectation based on promises. This is going to happen. I'm confidently expecting that God will keep his promises. And one of those promises is that God will satisfy you. And you don't need money to be happy. What you need is God. And in God's kindness, one of the ways he satisfies you is by graciously giving you pleasures. And those pleasures are a gift from God, to enjoy as a gift from God. You may remember when I preached on 1 Timothy 4, 1-5, I warned against asceticism. Do you remember what asceticism is? Asceticism is severe self-discipline and avoidance of all forms of indulgence, typically for religious reasons. And when religious people deny themselves certain pleasures, it may seem like they're super holy, super spiritual, super devoted, super special, but that's not the case. The false teachers that Paul warns against in 1 Timothy 4, 1-5, make 2 claims. They say it's wrong to get married, so don't get married, and it's wrong to eat certain foods, so avoid certain foods. But that's false teaching, because marriage is a gift from God, and foods are a gift from God. And we should receive them with thanksgiving. It's false teaching to avoid God's gifts. God created marriage and foods for us to receive with thanksgiving. And you might have this misguided mindset that you shouldn't enjoy what God gives you. So you might think, I'm going to be super spiritual by not enjoying what God gives me. You might think that you honor God most by abstaining from what God gives you. In other words, you think that God is most glorified in you when you abstain from enjoying God's gifts. If you think that way, that's a shame. You should enjoy God's gifts. The key, as you enjoy God's gifts, is that you enjoy them as gifts from God, not as ends in themselves. It's possible to enjoy marriage and foods, for example, as ends in themselves, not thanking God for them. That's no good. If you do that, you're sinning against God. That's rebellion. So here are some diagnostic questions to ask yourself. Do you receive God's gifts to you with thanksgiving? Marriage and foods, for example. Or do you feel guilty about the gifts? So maybe you have a gift that someone else doesn't have. Do you feel guilty about it because God gave it to you? That'd be a false guilt. You should receive with thanksgiving everything God gives you. Or do you think lightly of those gifts? For example, do you simply take God's gifts for granted, that is the ones he's given you, and then you focus on all the gifts he's given other people and has not given you? Well, that's a misguided mindset as well, where you are discontent with what God's given you, and all you can see is, but God, you gave this to other people and not to me. That makes your focus not on God and what he's given you and being grateful for that, but being ungrateful that he's given something to someone else and not to you. So if God gives you the gift of family, friends, status, wealth, health, strength, lots of energy, not a lot of pain, great intellect, whatever it is, receive that with thanksgiving. Don't feel guilty about that. Don't think lightly of it. Don't take it for granted while stewing with envy over specific ways he's granted gifts to other people. So that's charge number 3. Set your hope on God, which includes enjoying all of God's abundant gifts. Finally is charge number 4. Store up treasure for yourself. You might think, really? Store up treasure for me? That's the charge. That's what this passage is telling you to do. Store up treasure for yourself. Again, this sounds like what Jesus says in Matthew 6, 19 and 20. Don't lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves don't break in and steal. So in this passage, in verse 17, that charge them command governs these first 4 phrases in verse 18. So charge them to do good, charge them to be rich in good works, charge them to be generous, charge them to be ready to share. And the purpose and result of those 4 actions in verse 18 is to store up treasure for yourself, verse 19. So I'm going to state the purpose and result clause as a command. Store up treasure for yourself, and those 4 actions are the way to accomplish that. So I'll explain this by asking 3 questions. How should you store up treasure for yourself, for what reason, and for what purpose? So let's start with the how question. How should you store up treasure for yourself? And the answer is by doing good, by being rich in good works, by being generous, and by being ready to share. That's how. Do good, be rich in good works, be generous, be ready to share. Let's consider these 4 actions. A Christian who is rich in this present age may not have a need to work any longer. So there's some people who are so wealthy, they don't need to work a job. They have plenty of money. But Paul says that such a Christian, even a very rich one, should be very busy with his wealth, doing good works, being generous, being ready to share. So I'm exhorting all of you as rich people, remember that God owns everything. He gives us some of his stuff to steward. The purpose of having stuff, of getting stuff from God, is not to hoard it. It's to steward it in a way that honors God. My wife and I recently read a draft of Abigail Dodge's forthcoming book called Home Matters. It's for Canon Press. And I told her this is my favorite paragraph in the book. My wife first pointed it out to me. I've read it several times. So good. God can grow us by giving us little or much to manage. Think of a woman with one medium-sized soup pot. Maybe that's you. You just have one medium-sized soup pot. She has one to cook in, clean, and serve her guests from. She can make what will fit in her pot, which means she can't serve more than 8 people at a time. If she longs to serve more people, the one pot will be a challenge and a means of sanctification. Then think of a woman with 4 large soup pots. She can serve upwards of 50 people at a time. She also needs to clean and store these pots, not to mention all the added work of making soup for 50 plus people. She is being given much, and therefore much more is required of her. God can grow us into greater Christ-likeness through addition or subtraction. He can use 1 pot or 4 pots, but what we should never do is long for less because we think that is the means for holiness. Christ is the means for holiness, not asceticism. Our job is to manage and steward the number of pots he's given us and pray for more. I really like that mindset. Be content with what you have, and your desire is to be a good steward of everything God gives you, and pray for more so that you can do more good with what God gives you. As God gives you more, be rich in your good deeds. Be generous with the wealth God gives you. In Galatians 6:10, Paul says, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, especially to those who are of the household of faith. So here's the primary way I think our church needs to grow here. And that is, we need to grow in generous hospitality in our homes. A strategic way to be generous and to share with others is to be hospitable with your stuff, with your food, with your possessions, with your home. It's a wonderful way to bless others. God commands you, this is 1 Peter 4:9, show hospitality to one another without grumbling. Romans 12, outdo one another in showing honor, contribute to the needs of the saints, and seek to show hospitality. Our church does not emphasize programs. Sometimes I talk to my pastor friends, and they say, man, what programs does your church have? Ours has this, 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 and this. And I smile and say, we have 0 programs. It's wonderful. But what we do have is a culture that emphasizes hospitality. At least that's what we're trying to have. So I would like to exhort you, make it a priority in your household to emphasize hospitality. And sometimes people hear this, oh great, this church emphasizes hospitality. That's wonderful. I can't wait till everybody invites me over. Why isn't everybody inviting me over? Yeah, that can be a spiral. Don't be that person. Instead, think our church emphasizes hospitality. Who could we have over? Whom could we have over? Maybe we should plan this out. Let's do it every Wednesday night or every Thursday night, and let's just get it on the calendar and invite people out weeks ahead, and we can plan it. Or maybe it's bi-weekly, or maybe just monthly. Something regular where you're planning to show hospitality. We want that to be normal. And for many of us, it is normal, but for many of us, it's theoretical. We've seen it done, we've experienced it a little bit, but actually doing it seems a little bit intimidating. It's not hard. Talk to some of the older ladies in our church to get ideas. It could be paper plates and hot dogs. This isn't break out your fanciest stuff and impress someone. It's just welcome people into your home, into your life rhythm, and be kind and generous and do good with what God's given you. That's it. So consider what Paul writes in his letter to Philemon. He benefited from the generous hospitality of people who had the means to share it, and he writes this, I have derived much joy and much comfort from your love, my brother, because the hearts of the saints have been refreshed through you. Prepare a guest room for me, for I'm hoping that through your prayers I'll be graciously given to you. I love it. Now, when God does give you wealth, and we've already established that all of us are relatively rich, when God gives you wealth, you must beware of the sin of being stingy. This passage emphasizes being generous. So as God gives you the gift of wealth, you could be tempted to hoard that wealth and not be generous. So I want to tell you a story I heard this from my friend Dave Croto. It's in his book, Urban Legends of the New Testament. And after I read it, I texted him and said, is this about Dave Ramsey by any chance? He said, yeah. So that's not public, but now you know who it is. Okay, here's the story. I was listening to a radio show, and a financial advisor was taking phone calls. A man about 50 years old called and said, I've been following the principles you teach for years. Before you were on the radio, I was doing all these things, and my wife and I are very frugal. We put away just about everything we can. And then the radio host asked him, how much money do you make a year? And he said, about $50,000. And he asked, well, how much money does your wife make? He said, she stays home. And the radio host then asked how much they'd saved. And the man said, about $1.5 million. You do the math in your head. It took a long time to save up. The radio host thought that was great. But the man said, the problem is that we're having a hard time giving. We don't want to be generous with the church or with our children or with anyone. We have this mentality of hoarding money, and now we can't be generous with it. And the radio host ignored his concern and said, quote, but you have saved $1.5 million. Great job. So my friend's telling the story. He says, this man was in the midst of confessing his love for money, and he was being praised for it. His love for money was preventing him from obeying Scripture's commands on giving, and he was confessing this on the radio. That's a sad story. It's sad because this man was loving money with the result that he wasn't being generous. He had the ability to be generous, but he hoarded his wealth instead. And this story is sad because a financial guru who's a Christian failed to exhort this man to be generous and to beware the love of money. It's good to be a faithful steward of the money and possessions God gives you. It's good to save. It's good to invest. It's good to enjoy what God gives you. And God entrusts you with more stuff so that you can be generous with it. So as God gives you wealth, be generous with others. So that's question one. How should you store up treasure for yourself? By doing good, being rich in good works, being generous, being ready to share. Question two here. For what reason should you store up treasure for yourself? And it's the next line in verse 19, because it's a good foundation for the future. Thus, storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future. A firm foundation for the coming age. This short life is not all there is. There's eternal life ahead of you, and you should prepare for that now. If there were no future life, if this were all that there was, we would live differently. And many people have that mindset. This is all there is, so I'm going to live this way. But this isn't all there is. If there's a line, we're in this life, it's the dot on the line, and the line goes on forever. Technically, that's a ray. So live for the rest of the line. Live for eternity. Your focus should not be to live your best life now, as Joel Osteen teaches. And then another question, for what purpose should you store up treasure for yourself? It's so that you may take hold of what is truly life. That's the last phrase. So that they may take hold of that which is truly life. Lay hold of what is truly life. Experience true life. Accumulating wealth in this life is not truly life. Many people accumulate great wealth and then go to hell. They never take hold of what is truly life. They never experience true life. Now, I'm about to talk about 3 individuals by name who are now dead. I don't presume to know infallibly the eternal destiny of individuals. God is the final judge, and he judges justly. But here are 3 examples of some famous rich men who made a lot of money, but as far as I can discern, they did not submit to King Jesus. I pray that they did. I don't know that they did. Number 1, Andrew Carnegie, 1835 to 1919. He was a leader in the steel industry and one of the richest men in history. He built a fortune that today would be worth about $300 to $400 billion. It's a lot. He donated some of his wealth for libraries and education, but he embraced naturalistic evolution and he rejected Christianity. He said, I don't believe in God. My God is patriotism. Another example is Hugh Hefner, 1926 to 2017. He became rich from his company that mass-produced images of naked women. He was a hedonist. not a Christian hedonist, just a hedonist. And he lived in lavish mansions and had immense cultural influence. Another example is Steve Jobs, 1955 to 2011. Co-founded Apple, died with a fortune of about $7 to $10 billion. As far as I know, he rejected Christianity and explored Zen Buddhism. Again, as far as I know, all these men died without faith, without bowing the knee to King Jesus. And when they were rich and famous, many people thought, look at that guy. He is living the good life. But they did not take hold of what is truly life. So that's charge 4. Store up treasure for yourself. How? By doing good, being rich in good works, being generous, and being ready to share. For what reason? Because it's a good foundation for the future. And for what purpose? So that you may take hold of what is truly life. So to summarize the 4 charges, don't be haughty about your riches. Don't set your hope on the uncertainty of riches. Set your hope on God, which includes enjoying all of God's abundant gifts, and store up treasure for yourself. You may not think that you're rich, but you probably are, and God has entrusted you with significant wealth when you think about it from the vantage point of world history. As a person who is relatively rich, you're tempted to be proud about your wealth. As a person who's relatively rich, you're tempted to trust your money and your stuff. You're tempted to find security in how much money you have, what you own. As a person who's relatively rich, you're tempted not to trust God. You're tempted to take pleasure in what God has graciously given you without being grateful to God for it. And as a person who's relatively rich, you're tempted to store up treasures on this earth. You're tempted to do bad, to be poor in good works, to be stingy, and to hoard. Those are just temptations for the rich. So I'd like to close by asking God on our behalf for help to obey what he charges us about riches. Let's pray. Father, thank you for charging us how to think about riches and what to do with the riches you entrust to us. We ask, Lord, help us not to be haughty about the riches you've given us. Help us not to trust riches, which are so uncertain. Help us to set our hope on you. Help us to enjoy all of your abundant gifts as gifts from you. Help us be grateful. And please help us store up treasure for ourselves in the life to come. And we ask all this in the name of Jesus. Amen.